Welcome back to America Decides. There is national attention on Florida's new education standards that now include teaching middle school students that some enslaved people actually benefited from slavery. The new teaching guidelines are a result of legislation known as the Stop Woke Act that Republican Governor Ron DeSantis signed into law last year. The bill required the rewriting of the state's education standards. A part of the new standards say students should be taught about the, quote, harsh conditions enslaved people endured, but also, quote, how slaves developed skills which, in some instances, could be applied for personal benefit, unquote. Vice President Harris has seized on the issue in recent days in a series of appearances across the country. Last Friday, she traveled to Florida to draw more attention to the issue, and today in Chicago, she condemned the changes yet again.
And for these extremists, that was not enough. They now push forward revisionist history. They push propaganda. They suggest that enslaved people benefited from slavery as they insult us in an attempt to gaslight us. Well, we will not have it.
Governor DeSantis was asked about the new education standards on Friday while campaigning in Utah. He said this.
You should talk to them about it. I mean, I didn't do it, and I wasn't involved in it. But I think what they're doing is I think that they're probably going to show some of the folks that eventually parlayed, being a blacksmith into doing things later in life. But the reality is, all of that is rooted in whatever is factual. They listed everything out, and if you have any questions about it, just ask the Department of Education.
Well, we did ask, and we had hoped to speak today with Florida Education Commissioner Manny Diaz Jr. about these changes. CBS News has followed up several times today and received no reply. If and when they do reply or consent to an interview, you'll see it here. But we do have a critic of these changes with us tonight, Florida Democratic State Senator Shevrin Jones, who represents part of Miami-Dade County and is a member of the State Senate's Committee on Education, joins us now. Senator, thank you for being with us. I know you've expressed concern with these standards. Other language in it, I've got about the first 21 pages of the new standards here, which have to do with African-American history. And I believe it's on page 17 that the standards say if high schoolers learn about race massacres, teachers must include, quote, acts of violence perpetrated against and by African-Americans. In essence, suggesting that, yes, things happen to African-Americans, but they may have also committed acts of violence. You serve on the state Senate's Education Committee. How troubled are you by that, by what it says about how slaves may have benefited from being enslaved?
First, thank you again for having me. And I continue to have to check to make sure it's 2023 and not 1963 with some of these policies that we're dealing with in Florida. It's a shame that I even have to say this, but slavery just was not a benefit to the enslaved. This idea that slavery was a benefit to the enslaved is absolutely asinine. Teaching that they gained skills from slavery just totally implies they didn't have skills to begin with, which is insane. They brought a knowledge and were not compensated for it. It's appalling, but it's also not surprising because this is the very same administration that for the past 6 months they did away with the African American studies through the College Board. They did away with what you can and cannot say when you're teaching African American studies. So there's no surprise to me that we have landed here today and that the department is trying to walk back their comments because they know what they did was wrong and disgusting.
Now, and we should point out, this is about a 215-page document that lays out all sorts of social studies curricula for grades kindergarten through 12th grade. The two things we've called out are 21 pages of suggested things on African-American history, including teaching first graders about African-American artists, teaching older students about African-Americans who demonstrated heroism and patriotism, and it includes Booker T. Washington, Jesse Owens, President Obama. It's these two and other things said about slavery and violence to or against African Americans that has caused this grave concern and drawn so much attention. What do you make of Governor DeSantis now saying that he isn't to blame for this?
Well, Governor DeSantis is the governor. He has been the same one over the last few years, who has been wanting to be the governor. He wants to be the chief justice. He wants to be the speaker of the House, Senate president. Yeah, he has been leading with a strong hand. So much so that the senators and the House members do not even can even operate as an independent body, because everything goes through the governor's office. And this idea that they even use someone like the Booker T. Washington to justify. Booker T. Washington became successful later in life, long after their emancipation, in spite of their time as a slave. That wasn't because of it. And so this continued misrepresentation of who we are as African Americans, we run the risk of raising an entire generation of young people who do not know who they are, where they come from, and the truth about their history. That is the epitome of indoctrination.
We mentioned we invited your state's education commissioner, Manny Diaz Jr., on and followed up several times with no reply. He did, though, defend the new standards. I want to play what he said and get your reaction on the other side.
What we should be striving to do is provide our students with all of this information and let them formulate their own opinions. That is what true learning is.
Your reaction to what he said?
I used to be a teacher. I know what diversity of thought is, and I know what educational freedom is. When you're tying the hands of teachers and when you're trying to control the minds of children, that is not what he's trying to suggest, unfortunately. And so I will say that I did speak with the commissioner today, and I'm proud that he's going to come have a conversation with the community, because the community is outraged. People are rightfully angry right now, and they want to be heard first and foremost. Now's the time to start that dialogue. So that's why I'm excited to announce first right here that we are currently in the process of organizing an event with Commissioner Diaz where he can address the community's concern directly with them at the historic Antioch Missionary Baptist Church. That's going to take place on August 10th at 7:00 p.m.
That's there in your district there in Miami-Dade?
That's right. It's right in my district in Miami Gardens. Because listen, people are so frustrated right now, from the church community to individuals in the lay community and abroad. Not just blacks are upset. People abroad are upset, because if you start coming for one group of people, who's next? And that's what we've been seeing with this administration. Every 6 months, it seems like there is something that we're fighting for while Governor DeSantis is running for president. And mind you, while all of this is happening, we're not discussing the real issues that we need to deal with. We're not discussing the fact that property insurance is astronomical here. We're not discussing the fact that the reading proficiency amongst our young people have not been addressed. We're not discussing the shortage of teachers. That's 6,000 plus of vacancies. None of that is being discussed. It's the culture wars that continue to suck the energy out of the room in Florida.
So let me just follow up. You said you spoke with the commissioner today.
Yeah.
He agreed to come on August 10th, you said, to your district to talk about this. Did you get a sense that he's getting a lot of calls like this from other lawmakers across the state?
I wouldn't be surprised that he's getting those same type of calls. I represent the largest black district in the state, and so rightfully so, it's important that he come address the community.
Federal Education Department told CBS News today states set the education standards for their own schools, essentially signaling there's nothing that can be done at the federal level. Beyond having the commissioner come to your district there in Miami Gardens, what more could you and your colleagues in state government do to address these changes and the concerns of your constituents?
You know what? I know that we are at a disadvantage when it comes to the numbers in the House and in the Senate. And so I know both leaders, Leader Fentress Driscoll and Leader Lauren Book in the Senate, are working to ensure that we create more of a balanced chamber that will allow for these things not just continue to be pushed down our throats during the legislative session. The only reason why the Republicans are in this position now in Florida is because they can. And so the slim majority that they have right now in the Senate, we're going to have to change that so we can hold them accountable for the things that's happening. But along with that, it's also engaging the community. The community are very outraged right now, but we're trying to show the community how they can take this outrage and turn it into action. Because we can't be so mad that we're going to do what needs to be done to bring about that change. I know that's what we're doing in our community. We're having a series of meetings that's happening to engage people back. So next time when election time comes next year, people know and they're clear on the agenda, and the people who are truly fighting for them. And they'll know exactly who needs to be serving in the legislature and also locally.
To be continued, Florida State Senator Shevrin Jones, who represents Miami Gardens there, Miami-Dade County, Florida. Thank you so much for spending some time with us and for sharing that news of your plans to meet with the commissioner next month.
Thank you, sir.